Joining us. We're going to get started right at 1, which it looks like it just turned 1 o'clock. So welcome. Thank you for joining us for the Hunting Wildflowers webinar. I am Samantha Alcozer. I'm the Conservation Coordinator for the Nature Conservancy, South Carolina, and I'll be your host for today. So today's webinar should last approximately 45 minutes. I'm going to start with a quick introduction. Then we'll have a presentation by Dr. Richard Porcher. And finally, we will have some time for question and answers before we wrap up. So just a few housekeeping notes. We have placed everyone on mute. However, we do welcome your questions. In the bottom middle of your screen, you'll see the chat button. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we'll make sure to ask some of them when Richard's presentation is over. If you haven't used Zoom before, there is a full screen mode in the top right hand of your corner of your screen. So go ahead and hit full screen, to really make sure that everything is showing. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Anne Baruch, who is a trustee of the Nature Conservancy and a wildflower enthusiast, who I hear has an amazing wildflower garden at her home on Spring Island. So to get things going, we're going to do a quick poll to try to get to know our audience a little bit better. All right, answers are coming in. Awesome. It looks like we have a good amount of people that know about a dozen or so wildflowers, and that's really great. So I wanted to just give you a quick intro as to who I am. I started last July as the conservation coordinator for the Nature Conservancy here in South Carolina. And in this role, I manage the monitoring of our 165 conservation easements across the state. For those who do not know, a conservation easement is a voluntary legal agreement that a landowner chooses to protect their property for future generations. So each year, I or a colleague will visit every property and make sure that the conservation values are being protected. So I have worked in the Southeast before, but after spending the past few years in Texas, I was a little bit rusty when it came to my wildflower knowledge of the Carolinas. And so during my first week, Elizabeth Foster, our director of philanthropy, found out I was a plant person and gave me a copy of Richard's book, A Guide to the Wildflowers of South Carolina. Richard, I was absolutely blown away by some of the information you decided to put in the book. I think this is the first time I ever read the introduction to a field guide. So I really appreciated all the thought that went into this. And it's really helped me when I visit different landowners' properties because they really are grateful when I point out an invasive species or a native flower that's on their plant that they didn't really quite know before. So I'm really honored to help with this webinar and learn more about your work and your new book. But I thought I would start with a fun but tricky trivia question first. So which of these are considered flowering plants? And this is multiple choice, so you can check more than one. Awesome. Okay. So most people got this right. The answers are maple tree and sweetgrass. So when you look at plants, all plants, you can put most of them into the category of flowering plants or wildflowers. The two groups that wouldn't be considered a flowering plant are your ferns and your conifers, that's where our longleaf pine falls in. So longleaf pine is not a flowering plant. But that's why you'll see that Richard included our native maple tree or our native sweetgrass in his Wildflowers of South Carolina book, because grasses and a lot of our hardwoods are flowering plants. Awesome. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Richard Porcher. Dr. Porcher is a biologist, historian, naturalist, author, conservationist, lecturer, and a teacher. And we are so fortunate that he spent 10 years on the board of the Nature Conservancy, South Carolina. For 33 years, he was a professor and researcher at the Citadel, but today he can be found in the field almost daily. He is widely recognized for authoring and publishing several books about wildflowers and rice culture. Dr. Porcher is in the process of photographing the wildflowers and plants of South Carolina with 1,450 different species already on file, which he plans to donate to the state. So you may have seen him featured recently in the Post and Courier. He had a great quote from that article that I wanted to share with you today. Being outdoors and working with people, roaming the forest and bogs and creeks and rivers, that's where life is. And that's where we all come from. And I decided that if I'm going to spend this much time outdoors, I want to make sure the next generations enjoy the same pleasures that we do. His latest project is an update to his wildflower book, A Guide to the Wildflowers of South Carolina, that he is working on with Patrick McMillan. They are updating the book to include a view towards climate change and how it might impact the state's flora. Today, he will give us a little behind-the-scenes look at the making of his new book and a sneak peek at some of his recent field visits and photographs. Richard, we are so honored to have you here today with us.
Thank you very much. Am I live now?
You're live.
I'm live, all right. I'm not used to talking into a computer, so we'll do the best we can. I thought I'd show you this first slide. This is a copy of the book that we recently did, The Market Preparation of Carolina Rice. And I show it because anytime TNC preserves tracts of land, quite often they preserve a lot of our cultural history. We know TNC preserves all of our natural history, but often they preserve much of our cultural history. And I was doing a book on the market preparation of Carolina rice, and now sometimes this slide doesn't go, oops, you're having a problem. Just hold on a minute. Oh, no, I need to back up. There we go, all right. This is Rosehill Plantation on the Cumbie River. TNC has an easement on it, owned by Henry and Molly Fair. And what you see today, what you see in this painting is what Rosehill looked like back in the heyday of the rice industry. But I went there recently when I was doing the book, and Henry showed me a structure. He didn't know what it was. Well, I knew immediately what that structure was. That was the remains of a water-driven rice mill. Now, these things are not, I mean, there's no other structure like that that's still extant. And that gave my co-author some of the material to do this diagram of a water pestle mill. The runs by water power, turns a wheel which raises and lowers pestles. I won't go into detail there, but the point is many of these properties that TNC protects have some of our cultural structures still left, and historians like myself can take advantage of that material and do books like the Story of Citadel and Cotton or the Market Preparation of Carolina Rice. Of course, they also preserve the natural history of Rosehill too. But I always try to make the point that so much of our cultural history has been preserved by TNC when they either buy property or have it under easement. So that's the example I'll use in that particular segment. Now we'll move to, this is the first book I did, Wildflowers South of the Carolina Lowcountry. That's the first book I did, and it was very successful. USC Press sold out very quickly to 5,000 copies. But then we decided it was time to do a state book. Since I already had the knowledge of how to do a book, decided it would do best now to do a state book of wildflowers. So Doug Drainer and I produced a guide to the wildflowers of South Carolina. I know you recognize Doug. He's on the TNC board now. He had all the knowledge of the mountain flora and the mountain communities. I had the low country. So we went together and produced a guide to the wildflowers of South Carolina. My royalties went to set up a scholarship at Clemson. His royalties set up a scholarship at Wofford. My scholarship at Clemson is a Batson scholarship, and I think maybe 15 students so far made use of funds from the scholarship at Clemson. In fact, all the books that I do, I use the royalties to set up scholarships. So this is the book. Now, USC Press called me 6 months ago and said, Richard, we want a new book, not just another edition. We want an entirely new book. It'll be based on this book. Well, there was no way I could do it. I was working on 3 other books at the time. So obviously I had to call in some help, and I called in Pat McMillan, who is director of the Botanical Garden at Clemson. So he will be the major author. I'll be the second author. Doug Rayner will be the third author. And we have somebody else, David White, working on the photograph. So we're now full production of a new book, Wildflowers of South Carolina. What they wanted was a chapter on how climate change affects wildflowers. So I turned that over to Pat, and he's working on it now. And I go out virtually every day. I was 2 days ago at Savannah River. Yesterday I was down outside of Conway. I leave for the mountains Friday and Saturday and Sunday photographing. Even though I've been working on the slides for a while, I've got 1,450 plant photographs, but there are a few ones we're still trying to get for the book, some of the rare ones. So we hope this book will be in press by this time next year. So that'll be a new book on wildflowers of South Carolina. And I'll now go over some of the properties that TNC either owns or has an easement on. Now this is Groton. They just got the easement on this property recently, much of it recently. Groton Plantation in Hampton County, and that's 22,000 acres of the most magnificent wildflower habitat you've ever seen. In fact, my dream right now is to get a graduate student to come down and do the floristic survey of Groton. I've talked to the manager. They're talking to the owners right now. This is how you train graduate students in botany. Send them down to a place like Groton. They'll stay there off and on for 2 years. And when they finish, they have a good training in the flora of an area and extend it into the flora of the state. So I'm waiting to hear now whether or not we'll be able to set up a graduate student down in Groton working on a floristic survey of the tract of land. And there you see the section of the river, 7,000 acres on the riverfront on the Savannah River. I can't wait to get down the coast. When the students down there, I'll be down there too. I really can't wait to get down to the Savannah River and work on those oxbow lakes and shell mounds and things scattered through that swamp. But there's a plant called swamp privet. I saw that years ago. I need to get a better photograph. I've got the flowers, but have not got the fruit yet. What we do in the new wildflower book, we can do one photograph of the plant, then put an insert of the flowers and the fruit. So we'll have 3 photographs in one, so to speak. So one of the first trips in the fall will be going down to the river and trying to locate swamp privet in flower. But there's the leaves on the left, and on the flowers on the left, and the leaves on the right. There's Stylissima aquatica, water dawnflower. There are 3 sites I know of this plant. The plants are no longer there. We found the plant at Groton years ago, and I need to get a better photograph of one where the flowers are a little larger. So in August, I'll be down at Groton looking to find this plant again, water dawnflower, to get a better photograph from a book. Everything in the new book is digital. All the thousands and thousands of slides, they were thrown out the window, and we're doing everything digital now. There is buckroot. I think it's only known in 2 places in the state. When I went down to Groton last week, lo and behold, there was buckroot. So I photographed the plant and the flowers. It does have a very large root that was used for food. So I want to go back and dig up one plant and photograph the root system, then put it back in the ground. But what we'll do is we'll have 2 inserts, the flower and the root, into the main photograph of the plant. So Groton is going to be a botanical paradise for botanists such as myself and a graduate student. There's some wildflowers at Groton, the gopherweed, pine, discariski, As I say, it's a very, very diverse system, mainly the pineland system, which are frequently burned, and that's the key to it. They have a burning regime every year, and they burn much of the plantation every year, and that's what's going to favor these wildflowers we're looking for. So we'll leave Groton now. Oops. All right, there we go to 9 Times Preserve up in Pickens County. This is, once again, TNC. I believe they either own this or an easement. I can't remember, but there's 9 Times. It's a magnificent site in the springtime. You've got the riverside communities, got the rich beach forests. You've got the areas at the very top sort of the grassland area. So this is 9 Times Preserve in Pickens County. And on the top of it is a little plant called Sheely's saxifrage, Saxifera sheelyi, named for my dear friend, Harry Sheely. Hope he's here today. He and I were in the field 2 days ago at Craig Pond, and that occurs at the top of the mountains. Harry, of course, is a trustee for the Nature Conservancy now. He's been on there a good many years, but this is a plant. Botanists often honor people with naming a plant in their honor. So this plant was named for Harry Sheely, my dear friend, and a trustee of TNC. Beautiful little plant. I had to climb up there on an hour to photograph that and had a little trouble getting back, but many of the plants I'm looking for now are hard to locate, but we'll do the best we can. There is Sheely's saxifrage. Another plant up on 9 Times, ash leaf golden banner, another rare plant. I thought you will use that in the book. I think we're going to try to get something like 800 or 900 plants in the new book. With digital photography, it makes it much easier, much cheaper. So we reckon to really have an expanded book of the wildflower book. Sandy Island, this is our TNC preserve on Sandy Island. I'm not sure if you've been there before, but let me see if I can get this. I didn't mean to back up. Let me try to back up again. Oh, there we go. It takes me a minute to get all these machines working. There we go. Here is Sandy Island. I think you can see the pointer. That's the upland. Down here, the old rice fields. So the rice fields are a magnificent waterfowl habitat. And the upland habitat here, many, many colonies of red cockaded woodpecker. So now TNC has preserved one of the major habitats for red cockaded woodpecker, but also much of the rice industry artifacts. And move on. And they have a marvelous program of prescribed burning. There you see, I forgot who it is, but they first burn around the trees of the red cockaded woodpecker, and you can look in the background and see the fire advancing towards it. So all the red cockaded woodpecker trees are preserved or protected by burning a rim around them first before the main fire comes through. So I've been down there doing one of the burning seasons, and let me tell you, these people who work for TNC are the most professional people I've ever worked with. They know how to do a prescribed burn and protect land and manage land like no other group I know. All right, move on. And here's a little ecology. Before TNC purchased this property or had an easement on it, the pine land hadn't been burned for a long period of time. As soon as they burned it, up pops these beautiful orchids and pitcher plants in what we call a pitcher plant bog. The bog had been suppressed for many, many a year because fire had not burned, the trees were thick, the pine needles were thick on the ground. But once they began their burning program, all of a sudden, these pitcher plant bogs were able to regenerate, and that's what you see in this slide today, the bog on the left and some of the pitcher plants on the right. So this is the key to many, many wildflowers, a correct burning regime to restore the health of the pitcher plant bogs and the wildflowers. And here you see a typical scene on the pitcher plants on Sandy Island that have responded to the fire regime that TNC is now working. There's Sarracenia flavor on the left and Sarracenia mine on the right, trumpet pitcher plant, hooded pitcher plant. So that place is a paradise for wildflowers, mostly done because of the burning that TNC rebrought into Sandy Island. And they have the marvelous rice fields, many, many thousand acres of abandoned rice fields. That's on another entire story TNC can tell. the history of Sandy Island, the deadly rice fields. Part of my lectures are, working in the rice fields was really a very hard task. Some people think it was benign, but if you don't believe working in the rice fields as an enslaved person, come down to the Sandy Delta with me in August at noon, and I'll be sitting in a boat with my Madeira and lunch, and I'll let you get out on the bank and work for an hour with a shovel, and you'll see how difficult it is that the work that the slaves had to do to create the rice kingdom. So there's a typical scene of slaves harvesting rice, but so we have a story we can tell on Sandy Island based on the rice culture. And the coastal Sandy Island, as a West African community, vibrant African community out there, African American community that are descendants of the slaves, that enslaved people that worked on Sandy Island for many a year. So there's so much cultural history on Sandy Island, a story being told and waited to be told. And I have made use of Sandy Island numerous times from the wildflowers and working on the rice culture. Here is recess plantation on the Savannah River. There's Billy Exley leaning against a large tree. But the key to that is, or the key to this slide is count up. There is a little plant we call needle palm. On the left is the plant. I'm not sure if you can see the little needles here. The little small needles that stick off, and there are the flowers. So recess plantation has one of the populations of needle palm, a very rare plant in the state, and one I photographed, and that will be also in the wildflower book, needle palm. Now we go to Washoe Reserve. This is in the Sandy Coastal Reserve on the South Sandy River. The area outlined in yellow is land owned by the Nature Conservancy. They own and manage Washoe Cut. Washoe Cut is also a remnant of the rice industry. This area was dammed off right along here, and the water backed up to create a reservoir for the rice industry. At times when you didn't have supply of fresh water in the river, right along here, they could take fresh water from the reserve and flood the rice fields. So there are many hundreds of abandoned reserves throughout the state, and they are some of the most magnificent waterfowl habitat you'll see anywhere. And I know many of you have been down to Washoe. Here's a slide in Washoe of the woodstocks. So many, many species of wildflowers find a home in Washoe Reserve and managed by TNC and also owned by TNC, a magnificent place. And the wildflowers there, of course, are, oh, there's my little photograph of Washoe Reserve. I've got the morning is breaking in Tallahassee. I don't think y'all go back as far as I do, but remember Cat Stevens and his song, Morning is Breaking. So I thought I'd bring that into the introduction to Washoe Reserve. I went there one morning to try to get a good photograph, and we'll use that in the book as a typical type of community. And Washoe Reserve also has a whole series of floating aquatics. There's floating heart on the left, sweetwater lily on the right. They have a boardwalk that goes into the reserve, and it's open to the public. And if you really want to see a magnificent site protected by TNC, you need to go to Washoe Reserve for the aquatic plants as well as the waterfowl. Combahee River. TNC has a lot of land up and down the Combahee River protected. I didn't name a particular site, but I've spent many a day in the boat up and down the Combahee River photographing. There we have the beautiful, spotted lilies up and down the Combahee River. And also the waterfowl on the Combahee River is also incredible. But TNC has numerous tracts of land in that Ace Basin in the Combahee River, protected and all available for public display. You can put in a boat and go up and down the river, and you step back in time to another world. All right, I think that takes me through the major section. As I say, I'm working almost daily on updating the photographs. I think Pat and I are going to try to have something like 900 photographs in the new book. That's the goal. I've got about 50 more. The ones I'm after are ones that are hard to find. I got a call from Pat this morning. that is a species delphinium flowering outside of Aiken. I don't think I'll be able to make it because he said the flowers are about gone, so somebody else is going to photograph it for me. But trying to get all these photographs now is really a task because I have to go almost every day. I go here, go there. I'll be up at Clemson, the mountains on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday trying to get a few last of the photographs for the summer plants or late spring plants. So, okay, I guess I'll turn it over to whoever's in charge now.
You'll turn it over to me, Richard. So that was really great information. Thank you so much. So we are going to head into our question and answer portion of the webinar. I see there are some great questions in the chat already. We received a few ahead of time, but everyone feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and I'll be asking Richard some of those questions one at a time. So Richard, the first question that we have for you is that you mentioned 9 times in the upstate, and we have Peachtree Rock Preserve in the Midlands and Washoe in the Low Country. What is your favorite time of year to go see those preserves?
Well, 9 times would be the springtime for the spring wildflowers, up in those beech woods and Oak Crooked Forest. So they have the bloodroots, the trilliums. So the springtime is probably the best on 9 times. The second one was Peachtree. I think the summertime is best for that. A lot of the sandhills plants in the summertime are in full flower. So there I'd go in the middle in the summertime. What was the third one again? I forgot. Washoe?
Washoe.
Now, for the birds, I'm not. The waterfowl, I'm not sure, but I imagine the summertime and early fall for some of the aquatic plants would probably be the best for Washoe. But maybe 9 times is actually incredible in the springtime with the trilliums and the bloodroots and everything in full flower.
Well, that sounds great. All right, I have another question for you. So in the Francis Marion National Forest, they have some amazing wildflowers and carnivorous plants. When's the best time to go see some of those carnivorous plants in flower?
In flower, starting in late spring, summertime, I guess middle spring, April, and through the summertime, and you'll see different ones in flower. But you can see the leaves, because all the carnivorous plant, the leaves are the trapping mechanisms. You can see those almost year round. But April, May, June, July, those are probably the best times for the flowers.
Do you have a favorite spot in the Francis Marion to go see them?
Yeah, we call it Florida Bay. It's a Carolina Bay that Pat named Florida Bay up on Halfway Creek Road. I was there 3 days ago, photographing the community. I guess Pat Miller and I think that's our favorite place, a place called Florida. It's a Carolina Bay, which has a pond cypress depression. And I go there almost seems like once a week. But there are many of the pitcher plant bogs scattered all through the Francis Marion Forest, Halfway Creek Road and Steed Creek Road. If somebody wants to simply go to the best areas in the Francis Marion Forest, they could go down Steed Creek Road or Halfway Creek Road. And those 2 roads pass through many of pitcher plant bogs, pond cypress depressions. So that would be those 2 roads take you right into the heart of the wildflower habitat.
Awesome. So we have another question for you. How do you take your pictures? Do you have a specific camera or lens you like to use?
Well, I use 105 millimeter. I use a flash system, and I have a Nikon 610. If I had to use natural light and do 1,500 wildflowers, I'd never get it done. You had to wait for the perfect light, no wind. So what I do is almost impossible to do it with natural light. So I'm going to do, my goal is 2,000 photographs. My goal is getting 2,000 photographs of wildflowers and plants in the state. And to do that, I just have to use a flash system. If I go up to the mountains and don't use a flash and photograph one plant, get home and it's not good, I don't want to go back again. So I use a flash system. Now my 2,000 photographs, all those will be in the public domain when I finish. I will figure out how to download all the photographs into somebody's computer, but any group that wants the photographs, all they have to do is contact me and we'll figure out how to get the photographs to their system. All I ask is that they don't sell them and they just give me credit, but they will be available to any public organization that wants them to use for their work. But I'll let people know I've got almost 1,500 now, and 2-3 more years, I should have my 2,000 photographs.
Awesome. Okay, this question was submitted ahead of time. Is there one discovery from the field that stands out to you as the most exciting or has a fun story attached?
Yeah, I'll push this button here. All right, there is cancer root. I've only seen that plant 3 times in my life. I did find it for the low country book, for the state book, and we wanted it for this new book. And I couldn't find it anywhere. None of the botanists knew where it was. Everybody I called, Pat, Doug, everybody, no one knew where it was. That's a parasitic plant. See, no chlorophyll, but it's a flowering parasitic plant, and that tells a whole story of wildflowers. So I had to have it. Well, Doug Rainer was one of the ones. I mentioned Doug. He's on the board now and one of the co-authors of the new book. And he called me up one night and said, Richard, I found it. What? Cancer root. And he told me he was fishing on a river in North Carolina, and he hooked a trout. I believe it was a trout, and he pulled it up to the bank, backed up and pulled it up to the bank, and leaned over to unhook the hook from the fish, and lo and behold, right between his feet, there was the Ora Blanchi, or the cancer root. So I was in the car the next morning and went straight the way he told me, went to the bank and photographed this little cancer root. So sometimes plants, you can't find them, you simply come across them doing other things. So him fishing on the bank up in North Carolina, he found the cancer root, and now it's photographed and will be in the new book.
Awesome. All right, so talking about pitcher plants, would you consider them rare?
Well, some are and some aren't. Sarracenia jonesii is rare up in the mountains, but hooded pitcher plant down here is very common. The Wales trumpet. So many of the pitcher plants are almost like weeds. Others are very rare, so you can't simply all lump them in one group as all being rare or all being common. There's that Sarracenia jonesii up in the mountains of South Carolina and North Carolina. It's extremely rare. In fact, it's a federally endangered plant. Let's say some of the ones down here are just very common.
Thank you. Okay, so what are your...
We never want to dig them up. They're common because people take them to the yards. They have to have a certain requirement to survive. So it's best to leave all the carnivorous plants where they are. TNC and state has enough habitat. You can view these plants anytime you want. If you want me to take you out, if you want to dig one up, and I don't want you to, I'll take you out and show them to you myself if I have to keep you from digging them up. So those plants are best observed in the wild. There are plenty of places for people to see them.
I completely agree. Thank you, Richard. So we had another question. What are your favorite high diversity wildflower sites that are open to the public?
Probably in the Francis Marion National Forest, because it's my backyard and I go out there so often. But you have the beautiful pond cypress savannas and longleaf pine savannas. Those are some of the most diverse habitats we have. The longleaf pine savannas, sometimes in a square meter, you can get 200 species of plants. So for me, right in my backyard from Mount Pleasant is the Francis Marion National Forest, 250,000 acres and many, many acres of pond cypress savanna and longleaf pine savanna, with just so much of the wildflowers in this area right there.
I agree, Richard. Francis Marion is really a gem right in the backyard for us. Okay, we have a question about a specific plant. I'm going to try to pronounce the Latin correctly, so bear with me. But how rare is Amianthium muscatoxicum, fly poison or crow poison, in the Piedmont counties of York and Chester?
I'll say it's sort of uncommon, but not necessarily rare. I mean, I've seen it in numerous places. It's, once again, a plant you don't want to collect, but a botanist will know where to go for that. And I think most of the sites up in the mountains where it should be, people have found it. I've seen it up there in numerous places.
Awesome. So there's a specific question about the spider lilies that you had photographed.
Right.
Were they photographed in the Catawba River at Lansford Canal?
Well, I have a photograph of the habitat, and I did photograph the spotted lily there. Now we're supposed to go back. I was supposed to go back and photograph the community again for Pat and I in the book. We want to use that as the Rocky Shoals community. It has been underwater all year, and most of the flowers, I think, washed away. So I'm not sure what we're going to do for that community slide. But this year, you probably didn't get a chance to see the spotted lilies at Lanford Canal. I may have to use my old slide, which is a film, and maybe scan it in, unless we can find somebody who has a photograph of it. But this year, because of the high water, river water, I don't think anybody had a chance to see the spotted lilies at Lanford Canal on the Catawba River.
Thank you, Richard. So what made you decide to go into studying botany in college? Was there a certain point when you started your education that you decided botany was for you?
Well, as an undergraduate at the College of Charleston, I was a zoology major. They didn't even have a botany course at the College of Charleston when I was there. But I wanted to go to graduate school and get a PhD and teach, so I went to Carolina, the real Carolina, University of South Carolina in Columbia. And since I didn't have a course in botany, the dean put me in Dr. Batson's field course in botany. I guess it's called fall flora, to round out my background. And he was one of the most dynamic teachers I've ever met. The third time, as soon as he recognized the Porcher name, he started talking about Henry Ravenel and Francis Pierre Porcher, all these people in my background who were very noted botanists. And really, after the third time, the third field trip, when I came back, I sort of tiptoed up to Dr. Batson, a very uneasy talking to this great man. But I said, Dr. B, how can I switch to field botany? He said, you just did. And that was it. And I loved him so much. And then I found out about my background. And literally, I became a botanist that third day when I was at Carolina. And the wildflower book we did, the state wildflower book, Doug and I dedicated the book to Dr. Batson. So I set up a scholarship in his honor at Clemson for graduate students. So anybody listening probably has somebody who came into their life at one time and made a profound change, a priest or a businessman or a family member. Well, Dr. Batson, and the chances are being put in that course, it might not have happened in another day, but once I went out in the field with Dr. Batson, I realized I was a field botanist.
That's awesome. I always love hearing those stories. Okay, so do you think our wildflower diversity and how it supports our pollinators has had any influence on the state's agricultural success?
Oh boy, now you're really getting in a little out of my field right now. I do know that I have a farm outside of Manning, and we put in for a program. We got to plant 12 acres of pollinating garden. So everybody feels we need more plants out there. And but I've got 6 acres already planted, and I'll plant 6 more in the fall. I believe most people understand now that we need more and more of these habitats to support the bees, which of course in turn support pollination in our crop plants. So that's my gut feeling. Need to plant is have many of these wildflowers gardens as we can to support the bees.
Definitely. So as most people know, Table Rock State Park had a wildfire a few years ago. Did you notice an increase in wildflower diversity after that fire?
I have not been up there to that particular site. I do know that numerous sites in the mountains that are burned very quickly, they respond very quickly with new growth of wildflowers. I just have not been up to Table Rock since they had the fire, so I can't answer that about Table Rock. But I do know some of the areas that have burned over the years, certainly the wildflowers have proliferated, just like at Sandy Island down here.
Awesome. Okay, so back to our carnivorous plants. How far south have you found Venus flytraps in the wild in South Carolina?
No one has seen it this side of the Santee River that I know of. It's in North Carolina and South Carolina. And our state is in Horry and Georgetown County. There was one record of it on the Sandy Coast Preserve back in the 50s, I believe, but no one has ever been able to re-find it. So in South Carolina, it's in Horry County and Georgetown County, nowhere else. And then of course it occurs up in the North Carolina area, but no one's been able to refine the site at the Sandy Coast Reserve where Richie Bell found it years ago. So 2 counties in our state.
Awesome. All right, this is the last question for you, Richard. So would you consider wasps also pollinators, just like our native bees?
Ooh. You're getting out of my field now. I bet I'll pass on that. Maybe somebody else can answer that. I'm not certain of that.
Okay, I did see that our Director of Science and Stewardship, Eric, did say wasps are big pollinators. So we like the wasps.
I'll take a word for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the presentation and learned something new. We invite you to visit nature.org/scpreserves for more information on preserves near you. So as you exit, you'll be asked 3 questions. We'd love your feedback to make sure future presentations are even better. So thank you, Richard, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you. I hit it right now and photograph a plant.